Hey guys, just wanted to make a quick follow-up video to the video that I just posted. A lot of the stuff I just had gotten in, and I'm going to be making some modifications to the bike. In the previous video I had talked about the suspension valving that I'm going to be doing. I think the bike has a lot more potential than we're seeing here, and it drives me nuts when I'm really pushing the bike hard to see the way that it handles. Now, as I mentioned in the previous video, I know for sure that this front wheel is not true. It needs to be trued up. That's the first thing. Second, when it comes to handling, is the tires need to be swapped out because they're not good. From that point, I'll do the valving in the suspension. I'll go into more detail later on, but I just wanted to cover the things that I'm about to cover in the very next video that I release. One is this 30 millimeter accelerator pump. Now, I don't really see why an engine like this should need one, but there's no XRs or Honda XRs or any of the smaller four-strokes by any of the Japanese manufacturers that I've ever seen that had an accelerator pump style carburetor. The only reason why I think this bike might actually benefit from one is because the compression is a lot higher than, say, an XR 100 or a CRF 100. And because of that, it's the only thing I think that will work on this bike. I have tried everything, like I had mentioned in the previous video. I've done every jetting combination you could think of. I even tried restricting the air intake, which actually helped. But what also helped is spraying a tiny bit of fuel with an atomized sprayer. Just when I'm grabbing a handful of throttle, it seemed to take care of the problem. I also had mentioned in the last video that the exhaust is probably a bit restrictive as well, so that I can address, but I want to do this first. This is going to require a special throttle cable. It's going to require a throttle cable that's a double throttle cable, not a push and pull like the larger four-strokes. This would be a pull and pull. And what it does is one pulls the accelerator pump on the throttle being opened, and the other one actually pulls the slide up like a traditional carb. I have to put all that together, fabricate it, run it all through here. So I don't have time to do this in the video because it actually looks like it's going to rain out here right now, although on the camera you probably can't tell. Along with the carburetor, I will be making a modification for something that is greatly needed on these bikes, which is a petcock with reserve. Oops. Okay, a petcock with reserve is a must. The thing is, I've been looking into this for quite some time, and what I found was there is no manufacturer out there that makes the current type of petcock, which is what this is. This is a 10 millimeter shank. The reason why, after doing a ton of research, I discovered why they don't make this style in a reserve type. It's simply because this shank itself is too small in diameter, the inside diameter, which is this. This is too small to have a coaxial style input for reserve and standard on fuel positions. And this is what I mean by that. This is a reserve petcock. Has a 14 millimeter nut with a, I believe it's 12 millimeter coaxial input. This is a reserve. You see how it's, this portion of it is for the on fuel. The lower portion of it, this portion of it right here, is for the reserve. So that little gasket up here, I'm sure you can see that, that's where the on fuel would go when this is in the on position. Once it gets below that, then reserve would have to be used. But the problem is on those types, on these types simply don't have enough of space in there. That's why you can't find the factory default petcock on this bike with reserve. It's because there's physically not enough space in the valve itself to have that feature. So, since modifying the tank to accept this would be an absolute nightmare, because the tank on this bike has a female nipple that this screws into. The problem is, like I said, since they don't make these in reserve, we have no choice but to modify it. Well, modifying it to this makes no sense because I would have to use an adapter. If I use an adapter, then I'm right back where I started, because the internal still has to be the 10 millimeter. It's just not going to work. So what I'm doing instead is, with the petcock I just showed you, and this might be a service I might end up doing, is this type of petcock has two standard 6 millimeter bolts. When I say 6 millimeter, I'm talking about the shank, not the head. 6 millimeter. I have the necessary tapping kits and the inserts, the brass inserts to put into the tank. I'm going to remove that and put this in. I'm pretty sure this is going to work really well, because only on the farm alone, I've ran out of gas 4 times, and I can't even imagine if you're using this bike to as a dual sport bike and you're on the road, not having reserve is ridiculous. So what I am going to do is modify the tank itself, and I'm pretty sure it'll go fairly smooth. I don't think everybody is going to be able to do this, because it is going to require some skill and some experience. I've done this plenty of times before, so I'm going to make the necessary modifications and put the shell, the brass inserts into the tank, and then enlarge that hole that's currently in there to accept these. Because of the gasket, the whole thing will be sealed, and it should work out. And it would be a much needed upgrade in my eyes on any of these bikes. Lastly, I remember talking about sprocket size, final gearing on this bike. It comes with a 14 countershaft sprocket on the engine. First gear is way too low. It's so low it's basically useless with the 14 tooth that it comes with. I have a 15 on it now, but the reality is that I had mentioned in a previous video that I think going any more than 15 is probably a mistake, because the engine doesn't have the power to actually run it. But after more experimentation and more testing, what I found is that the bike doesn't have enough power to do it, to wheelie or do anything efficiently. When I say wheelie, I don't mean just cranking wheelies just for the fun of it. I'm talking about getting over logs and stuff like that. The bike just does not have it. So adding these larger sprockets is not going to make any difference in terms of the wheelie, and it's still not going to be able to do it, right? But what I will get out of these sprocket size changes is I will get a much more useful first gear, because even now first gear is basically useless. It makes the bike much more jumpier than it should be. So I got a 16 and I got a 17 tooth, and I'm going to do testing on camera with these. I'll actually take the camera out. I'll put the action cam on the helmet, and I'll also take this camera here, and I'll go out and I'll do some testing, and you can actually see the way things are going. I'm really curious to see if a 17 will make first gear much more useful. Since it doesn't have any power anyway, it's not going to really affect that side of it. My goal is to make first gear more useful, which would make the entire gearing range much more useful. So instead of it topping out at 54 or 55 miles an hour, it'll probably go faster than that, maybe 60 to 65. But really my goal is not top speed. It's really because of the first gear being so useless in an off-road environment. For you folks that are riding or using this bike for dual sport use, and you're using it up for on-road, I'm pretty sure the 17 will actually help quite a bit to make things a bit more comfortable, so the bike isn't whining out so much at its top gear, which is 4th on this bike. So I just wanted to just kind of touch on these with this video, and just mention that I'll be checking gearing changes on camera, We're going to do a petcock upgrade. We're going to do a 30 millimeter accelerator pump style carburetor, which I'm pretty sure will take care of this massive hesitation. And the last thing, if I have to, when it comes to the fuel system and the performance of the engine, I might end up switching out the muffler system itself or modifying this one to have a better flow. And then another video that'll be separate from these is finally I'm going to rip apart the fork tubes and address the valving, because I did some testing the other day and I played around with the shock, and if you remember in previous videos, the shock on this bike has been upgraded to a D&M, and I am a dealer for D&M suspension now. So what I did was I just did some quick test with the rebound control only. I had a little spot that I was working through, and this spot had some really tiny ruts in it, but when you go over them, it would rattle the fillings out of your mouth. It was ridiculous. But by speeding up the dampening on the rebound of the shock, I noticed a significant difference. The problem is I don't have that adjustability on the front end. So this is where the valving changes are going to come into play. I think if I take out the shim stacks of the fork, change the valving so that the flow is quicker, which would speed up the compression and rebound on that fork, I think it'll make a huge difference, and I may not have to touch the rebound or the valve stack on the shock. I noticed such a big difference just in the rear end that if I do make the necessary changes on the front end, I'm pretty sure it'll make a significant difference. And of course, I can pass that on to everybody that owns the bike, and I may actually provide a service to be able to do that, because I don't think very many people are going to be willing to take apart the entire front end of the bike to make that modification to the valve stacks. So again, I'm going to be checking gearing changes with a 16/17 countershaft sprocket upgrade to make the transmission a bit more useful. I'm not going to be worried about the bike as far as its torquiness, because it really doesn't have much anyway, so I can't imagine it being any worse. One last thing I forgot about on the Storm. I don't know if you guys have noticed this, but there is a running light up in the corner. It is not wired correctly, though. That running light is supposed to be a daytime running light, and it's supposed to be wired as soon as the engine starts or the key is turned on. But for some reason, they didn't wire it right. It's wired with the headlight, which is useless. But what I did was I replaced the light with a red LED. And the reason why I did this is because when I'm working here on the farm during the Scary Acres season, I work at night while it's going on. Well, the problem is that this headlight on high beam is so bright when it's flashing, I think it's too much. So I'm going to rewire the running light with a toggle switch on the headlight so I can flip it between this light here and the high beam, and that will make it so that when the flashers are turned on, this will flash with the amber turn signals instead of the high beam. High beam is great for the daytime, but at night it's tough because it's so bright in contrast to the dark event that I think it's a bit annoying. So I'm going to modify that, and I'll show you. Like, this light should not go on when the headlight's on. It should go on when the key is turned on, but for some reason the factory didn't wire it correctly. See that? The key is on right now. This should be on and it's not. But when you turn the headlight on, it is. So this light, like I said, is going to be wired to a toggle switch that'll flip between the high beam and this light. So when the flashes are on, like so, instead of the high beam flashing, I'll have the option to have this red light. It's not going to be very well projected, but it doesn't matter because it's dark. It'll stand out very well. So that'll be on. That'll be part of the next couple of projects when I'm working on the rest of the stuff that I just went over in the last video. This this lighting will also be taken care of. Thanks guys for watching. I'll see you next time.